Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot preach like Paul, you can tell the love of Jesus and say he lives in all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. You can tell the love of Jesus and say he lives in all. Broadway, Broadway, where the night's brighter than day, everybody's happy and gay all along Broadway. Sweethearts and beaux going to the movies and shows, dressed up in their Sunday best clothes all along Broadway. When I'm out of town, I'm so down when I walk along the main street. Anywhere, I don't care. I always find Main Street just another plain street. Broadway, Broadway, take a little time out to play. Everybody's living full sway all along Broadway. Broadway, Broadway, everybody's happy and gay. I'm living full sway on Broadway, Broadway. Sweethearts and beaux going to the movies and shows, dressed up in their Sunday best clothes all along Broadway. When I'm out of town, I'm so down when I walk along the main street. Anywhere, I don't care. I always find Main Street another plain street. Broadway, Broadway, take a little time out to play. Everybody's living a full sway all along Broadway, all along Broadway, Broadway. If you believe within your heart, you know
Rosalind Burrow. Marvelous, marvelous. Believe in yourself. And if you do that, maybe you can dance on down Broadway. And if you get a little tired, there's a little balm in Gilead. So it is all about understanding. There's a message in every song, and there's a purpose by which we have asked great artists to join us. I am delighted and honored to have the privilege of introducing our guest lecturer for this occasion, the Reverend Dr. Calvin O. Butts III is the president of SUNY College at Old Westbury and pastor of the nationally renowned Abyssinian Baptist Church in the city of New York, a native of this great city. Dr. Butts earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree in philosophy from the great Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. He returned to New York and earned a Master's of Divinity degree in Church History from the Union Theological Seminary and a Doctor of Ministry in Church and Public Policy from Drew University, New Jersey. He has taught urban affairs and served as an adjunct professor in the African Studies Department at City College of the City University of New York. He has also taught Black church history at Fordham University. Dr. Butts has given numerous lectures and speeches at colleges and universities across this great nation. Along with his presidency at the College of Old Westbury, Dr. Butts continues as pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in the city of New York, and more specifically in Harlem. Among the great historic Baptist churches in the nation, under his leadership, this great church is committed to playing an active role in the ongoing development of New York City. He is the chairman of the National Affiliate Development Initiative of the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS and a founding member of the organization's Board of Commissioners. He has served as president of AfriCare, an independent organization dedicated to the improvement of the quality of life in rural Africa. Dr. Butts has been so honored and presented with honorary degrees from many colleges and universities across this nation. Among some of those are the City College of New York, Tuskegee University in Tuskegee, Alabama, Cleveland College of Orangeburg, South Carolina, Dillard University, Muhlenberg College, and on and on and on. Fellow students, it is with great honor and privilege that I have this opportunity to present to you a marvelous, wonderful person who has dedicated his life to liberation of our people. He has used the platform, the pulpit at Abyssinian, not to just to preach the good news, but also to empower people and to challenge those who come through those doors. That although we may have what we have, and we may be mighty successful, we have a responsibility to give back to the least of those in our communities. And as he has assumed the presidency of Old Westbury, he is in the business of transforming an institution and calling forth that institution to do more for those who grace that campus. And he is doing a marvelous job. And so I'm delighted that you have consented, Dr. Butts, to come today to deliver the presidential lecture on this occasion. Students, will we just stand and to give honor to this great man, Dr. Butts. Thank you, Dad.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson, and to Dr. Hippolyte and to the other distinguished members of the platform, and certainly to Rosalind Burroughs. I enjoyed your rendition so much. To Dr. Jackson and his administration, to the faculty and staff of Medgar College, and to the students who are assembled here this afternoon. I'm thankful for the invitation to come and present at this presidential lecture series, and I am honored by the confidence that your president has in me to allow me to speak to you this afternoon. Those who have ears, let them hear. I speak this afternoon as the pastor of a very old and substantial congregation, and as president of a very fine and stable and steadily growing public university. My mantra, and I say it everywhere I go, and it is especially true for people of African descent, is that education and faith are the Tigris and the Euphrates of our liberation. They are twin rivers at the source of our redemption. Without an inspired heart and a trained mind, you will go nowhere. I repeat it. Education and faith are the Tigris and the Euphrates of our liberation. Twin rivers at the source of our redemption. Without an inspired heart and a trained mind, you will go nowhere. I read an illustration the other night that resonated with me, and I hope that it will stay with you also. I'm sure that many of us will be able to identify with this because most of us have driven along the concrete belts that crisscross our nation. While driving along the highway one day, we came to a place where the old road was blocked off. The new road was not yet surfaced, and we bounced and crawled along for some distance. Dump trucks rumbled by. Gigantic earth removers shook the ground as they bit into the mountainside and carried it off. Bulldozers and graders were busy. And then we came upon a single solitary workman who was wielding a shovel. Everyone in the car started to laugh, and we all raised the same question: what can he do? Everybody was shocked to see a single man with a shovel on a job that involved the moving of hundreds of tons of earth and rock. One man with a shovel surrounded by machinery that was moving mountains 10 cubic yards at a time. How futile, how insignificant. And I'm here this afternoon to say to the students faculty, administration, and staff gathered at the great Medgar College that the 21st century seems to have entered into a vast conspiracy to deny us any individual sense of significance. This is an age of the concentration of power. This is an age of the concentration of power. Let me give you several examples of what I mean. Firstly, take a look at something called the European Union. The nations of Europe, realizing that we are living now in a global village, have all decided to come together, pool their talent, develop one currency, because they realize that in strength and unity there is strength. And so where you had England and France and Germany and all of these other countries acting independently, now more and more you're beginning to see them act as a unit, because they realize that they are involved in a world where they are witnessing the rising tide of color. Secondly, when I was growing up, there were several media and other organizations. For example, I was growing up, there was Time magazine. When I was growing up, there was Warner Brothers. And here recently, Johnny come lately to the scene, is something called AOL. These were individual corporations. And now, beloved, we all know one corporation that has gobbled up all the other individual entities, and it is simply known as AOL Time Warner. Or, for those of you who are as old as I am, you can remember in New York when there was once a Manufacturers Hanover Trust. There was once a chemical bank. There was once a Chase Manhattan Bank. And there was once a J.P. Morgan Bank. All of those banks existed in New York as individual operating institutions. Now you notice there's only one, and it's called J.P. Morgan Chase. They have gobbled up everything in between. This is an age of the concentration of power. We narrowly avoided, beloved, to give you another example of how this works. Nearing the end of the 20th century, we narrowly avoided having a King Richard in this country. It was only prevented by one black man who was a security guard. His first name Frank, his last name Willis. And he discovered two small pieces of tape on a door at the Watergate Hotel. If it had not been for that, then there would have been the coronation of King Richard, Nixon that is, in the United States of America. But if we're not careful in this age of the concentration of power, we may have narrowly avoided King Richard, but soon we may have King George. I am suggesting to you, those who have ears, let them hear, that the 21st century is witnessing a vast conspiracy to deny us any individual sense of significance. We are living in an age of the concentration of power. And not only are there banks involved and corporations involved and political shenanigans, but also media is involved. And we're watching day after day as the large media institutions try to consolidate their power. And guess what? They have help from no less a person as Mr. Powell, who is the son of Colin, who oversees the Federal Communication Commission. Beware, beloved. There is this conspiracy to take away our individual sense of significance. And these tend to reduce the importance of the average individual. The vast problems and forces of this time tend to make every thoughtful person feel insignificant. What can I do? You feel like a man with a shovel trying to build a highway. What do I matter? Why am I concerned? Why should I vote? Why should I come to the series? Why should I be involved? Nobody cares anything about me. It is a psychological commonplace, beloved, that we must have a sense of significance. Everybody wants to feel like they're important. This begins when you're children. If anyone in here has children, and you have raised children, you will understand the point that I'm about to make. When my children were growing up, I tried very hard to treat them all the same. But children have a unique ability to see things that parents just can't see. Cosmic significance is what I call this. They'd sit down at the dinner table, and I would pour some juice into their cups. And to my eye, it seemed that every cup had the same amount of juice. However, children have a unique ability to discern in a micromillimeter one tiny bit of juice more. And so when I'm finished pouring the juice, the cry arises from the dinner table, "Pop, what is it? Why did you give him more juice than you gave me?" That's what you call a cry for cosmic significance. You may look at me sitting there in your chair and say, "That's not me." But why do you think it is that you try to dress just a little differently? Why do you think it is that you might wear your hair one way, or your cap another way, or your dress another way? Because you want to be identified somehow as different from everyone else, so that people will notice you. You want to be significant. You want to feel like you're important. You want to go to a school where they know your name and you're not just a number. You want to live in a neighborhood when you walk by, people will call you by your correct name. You want to feel like you're somebody. Once a man or a woman is convinced that they are worthless or that they cannot do anything anyway, then they are defeated. If somebody can convince you that you're insignificant and you don't count, and they keep saying that over and over and over again, then you start to believe it yourself, and all of a sudden you have been beaten. You've been defeated, and nobody will care anything about you. But you let somebody feel like they are appreciated and respected, and they cannot be stopped. Once again, for those of you who will be in education, for those of you who are raising children or have nieces and nephews, it's so important that when you come upon your little ones growing up, that you don't call them ugly names or treat them like they're nobody. It means something to a child when you tell them how pretty they are, how handsome they are, how good they look, how they're growing up and speaking so intelligently. It makes a difference because you're making them feel like somebody. You're making them feel significant. And I'm telling you that the 21st century is entered into a vast conspiracy to deny all of us any individual sense of significance. Our young faith, let me pause now and speak to you as a clergyman of the Christian faith. And one of the most important things about our faith is that it has served to help people gain significance in a society that has traditionally tried to deny us any importance whatsoever. The United States of America, from the time the first African people landed on the shores and in the wilderness of North America, has tried to dehumanize us and put us down and make us feel like we're nobodies. Let me tell you how they did it. They wouldn't even call you by your name. If you had a full name, they'd just call you by your first name. Hey, Tom, come here. Hey, Mary, come here. Sometimes they didn't even use Tom or Mary. They just say, hey, you, come here. Everything was designed to make you feel like you were less than human. But the faith, the preacher, no matter what you may think of preachers, the church, no matter what you may think of church, if it had not been for that steadiness in our community, where people would dress up on Sunday morning, where they would come in and hear the songs of Zion, and where, if nowhere else in the entire society, they were told in church that they were children of God, that they counted that they were somebody. I grew up at a turbulent time in America in the 60s. And one thing that I will never forget, just before Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, he was down in Memphis, Tennessee. He was leading a march because he was trying to help garbage men gain their rights in terms of employees as the city of Memphis. There are pictures today that show those sanitation workers marching, and they carry a sign, and it says, I am a man. Some of you will see this. And one of the things that happened to me, I might have been 16, 17 years old, 18 when this was going on. I remember a preacher who was about 8 or 9 years older than I. I was struck by him because he had a huge afro. He wore a turtleneck all the time. He was from North Carolina, but he found his root or settled in Chicago. They called him the country preacher. I used to like Cannonball Adderley. They did a song about him, the country preacher. His name, of course, Jesse Jackson. And Jesse would go into towns working with Dr. King, and he would always inspire those who had been beaten down and those who had been told that they were nobodies and those who had been treated like they were less than human beings. He would always begin or end his speeches with the refrain and with the challenge, with the call and response. He said, I may be black, but I am, and the whole crowd would say, somebody. He said, I may be poor. He said, the whole crowd would respond, but I am somebody. And I tell you, beloved, the church and that kind of rhetoric has saved us from becoming acclimated to being treated as less than human beings. But our young black men and women are being overwhelmed by the forces of our time. We've been locked out, locked up, disrespected by others that too many of us now disrespect ourselves. Not only are we discouraged by many of our counselors and teachers, but also by a failing public school system that still does not have a curriculum that inspires us to learn. As the public education system becomes more and more black than white, the resources for books, musical instruments, art supplies, and adequate teacher salaries goes down and down and down. The blacker the public school system becomes, the fewer resources are there. And let me tell you something else for those of you who may be considering a vocation, an occupation as educators. It's a shame, but in the city of New York, the greatest city in the world, there is still not a curriculum that deals with the contributions that people of African descent have made to the building of the United States of America. It's a second thought. It's an afterthought. And I don't care who the chancellor is now or who they have been in the past, they have never dealt with the fact that many of our children are not challenged because they can't see themselves in the curriculum. And it's not something that you should pass by lightly. And when our children have a chance to learn musical instruments, when they need teachers who are encouraged by better salaries, when they need better schools in which to study, the resources are cut out. One of the greatest decisions ever made by a judge, thank God he was a man of African descent, was to make sure that we got equal funding in the city as they get on Long Island and everywhere else in the state of New York. These are major decisions that are trying to help us to gain a greater sense of significance. Now, many of our young men and women, uninspired, poorly educated, feel worthless, insignificant, and try to convince others, like some of you who are listening right now, that they are in the same boat. They want you to think that you're trying to learn, you're studying hard, your desire for more education is weak, white, and wimpy. In other words, they have been defeated, and they often wear the uniform of the defeated. They are easily identified by all who see them as a person who has lost respect for others and, more tragically, has lost respect for themselves. See, they want you to think that if you study hard, somehow you're a square. If you study hard, somehow you're trying to be white. If you study hard, you're a wimp. But I've already told you, if you don't study hard, you're going to be left on the trash heap of civilization. They're going to look over you. And many of us who have incorporated this into our psyche have put on the uniform of the defeated. They see you when you're coming. They don't have to listen to you. They don't have to read your resume. They look at you and tell that you don't respect them and you don't respect yourself. I'm not trying to come down on anybody. I'm telling you what the fact is. Those who have ears, let them hear. You can keep trying to listen. You can keep trying to make people try to believe what you believe, but the world is a big place. I travel all over the world. I was in China not long ago, and they invite you to lecture in China. When you go to lecture in China, you lecture to about 6,000 people at one time. And the students, I had an interpreter because I can't speak Chinese. The students said, well, we don't want you to use an interpreter. We'd rather that you just give your speech and we'll try to understand it. I said, oh, come on. They said, no, please. So the interpreter sat down and I gave my speech. Do you know that those students understood 90% of what I had to say? And so at the end of the lecture, I said, well, why did you want me to give my lecture in English? They said, because the United States of America is the richest and most powerful nation in the world. And they speak English. And we want to know what they know. We want to have what they have. Now, how many of you in here can speak fluent Chinese? And do you realize that there are 1 billion Chinese people in the world? And did you hear me when I told you earlier this is a global economy? And do you understand what that means? That the jobs that you want when you come out of Medgar Evers or graduate schools, they want also? And do you realize that when they go to get their jobs, not only will they speak English and Chinese, but probably 2 or 3 other languages on top of that? Those who have ears, let them hear. You'll look around the auditorium right now and somebody's asleep. That person is a fool because they're not understanding what's going on. I'm not here trying to come down. I'm trying to get you to understand what's really happening out there. Those who have ears, let them hear. So, young black brother or sister, whatever the case, overwhelmed by societal, political, and economic forces that are conspiring to deny our individual significance and concentrate power under King George of America, who is protected, by the way, by the media. The media have joined this conspiracy. They have joined it because they don't do objective reporting, and it's coupled with not seriously investigating assertions like weapons of mass destruction. The media really didn't go after that. They let the man slide. The media is not really doing the kind of job that it needs to do. I respect the media. I know their power, but I want them to really begin to challenge the powers that be that have been lying to us. Where is Osama bin Laden? Where is Saddam Hussein? They can find you at the drop of a hat, and you haven't blown up anything. Beloved, it's laughable. A man who has never been in the armed forces lands on an aircraft carrier, dressed in a pilot's uniform, carrying a helmet, surrounded by the backdrop of an aircraft carrier and all of these military forces. They make him look like a military hero. It's a joke. But it's one vast conspiracy to concentrate power and make us all feel like we are insignificant. All of this brings to mind the message, one of the classic hip-hop songs of all time, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge, trying not to lose my head. Sometimes it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. Grandmaster Flash wasn't the first one to think like that. Marvin Gaye said it long before him. Makes me want to holler. Throw up both my hands. So we try to figure out, how do we keep from going under? I'll tell you how you keep from going under. It's what Marcus Garvey once said. He said, up you mighty race, you can be what you will. It's what the songwriters James Weldon and J. Roseman Johnson once said. It says, face the rising sun of a new day begun. It's what the prophet Ezekiel once said. He would say to us, black man and woman, stand on your feet. What you're doing here at Medgar Evers is an attempt to try to get us to stand on our feet. Try to get us to focus our attention on what some of the major issues are. Everybody needs money. I want you to have all the money you can make. But making money without a moral base that tells you what to do with it is a waste of time. What sense does it make to make $1 million and you don't know what to do with it? But go out and give it right back to those who mean you no good. I rode on a plane once with a man who makes, I call them dungarees, jeans. And he was explaining to me about the science of this thing. He said, look, he said, you can buy a good pair of dungarees, jeans, overalls, in Sears. I don't know what they cost at that time. He said, for about $10. He said, that's over on the work side. He said, but you know what we do? I said, no, tell me. He said, we take that same pair of jeans. He said, we beat them against the rock, pour bleach on them, tear off the bottom, and then we bring them over to the style side of the store and sell them for $35. He said, now the ones you buy on the work side of the store will last you forever. He said, you'll die and come back and the jeans will still be good. He said, but those that we take from the work side and bleach and beat on the rock and tear up, put a patch on and sell them for $35, he said, they won't last you more than a year or two. We don't understand value. And here, one of the reasons why we try to get a good education is so that we learn not only how to handle our money, but we learn certain values and morals that help us to navigate our way in the world. Materialism is the unconscious missionary faith of the West. All of us are going to the churches of unlimited credit and bowing before an altar of gold, bearing our souls, trying to make money just to turn it back over to those who are putting them into the kinds of institutions that suppress us and try to take away our sense of significance. Let me mention 3 or 4 things to you and then stop. First, as you develop your educational walk, seek out wisdom. Wisdom is not something that you get just because you live a long time. You don't get wisdom unless you wander purposefully through the great books of the ages. There are only a few people who could be a term, one or two people who could carry the term genius. Most of us get what we know because we study hard. I went to school with a fella who never studied. He walked around, looked like he was lost all the time. But every time he took a test, he got an A. Every time he wrote a paper, he got an A. When he graduated, he was summa cum laude, and I swear he never studied once in his life. I watched him. I used to sneak by his room to peep in the window to see if he was even looking at a book. He was eating popcorn and watching television. Made me so mad. I had to spend my time in the dormitory with my seat in a chair and my back bent over a book, trying to get some wisdom. How do you think men and women learn? You got to read, brother. You got to read. I went on a college campus while I was in China. It was in the middle of the evening, you know, as the sun began to set, and I expected to see people out throwing frisbees, you know, and running around and, you know, rapping the sisters and brothers, you know. None of that. I said, where are all the students? You know, university with 40,000 students. Where are they? They're studying. You want to come in the dorm? I walked in the dorm. They had their rooms all arranged neatly. They were in there working. I said, well, when do they celebrate? When do they party? You know? When do they have a good say? Ain't nobody got time for that. I said, what? He said, no, you know, we just got into the World Trade Organization. China is trying to become a superpower, a greater superpower. They're not playing. So for those of you who are sitting here at Medgar Evans looking at me today, if you got ears, you better hear. Because you're not just dealing with China, you're dealing with Iran and Iraq, you're dealing with the countries of South America, you're dealing with Africa, you're dealing with the whole world. And they're all competing with you. You, sister, sitting there looking at me. They want your job. If I can just get out of here and get a good civil service job, I'll be happy. If that's all you want, fine, but they want that too. They want it too. Wisdom. One does not find wisdom altogether in the practical contacts of life. You got to wander purposefully through books, sharing the beauty of art as well as disciplines of science. Study. That's how you get wise. Read. There's nothing new under the sun. Most of what is said has been said already. Even Jesus, my Lord and Savior, didn't say much original. Most of that stuff he quoted from the Old Testament. You know, and most preachers don't say anything original. If I get 2 or 3 good sermons a year, I'm happy. Most of that stuff I'm trying to copy from somebody else, reading books and trying to learn what others have had to say. And the same is true with all of you. Don't look at me like a cow looking at a new fence. Look at me as somebody who's trying to say something to you that might last you a while. Wisdom. The second thing I want to point you to is culture. How can one live unless one can have the overtones of music? Unless one can catch something between the lines of art? Unless one can become aware of the essence of human culture? Rise up and become a man or woman of culture. Learn who Henry O. Tanner is, who Toni Morrison is, who John Wirt was, who Paul Laurence Dunbar was, who Soyinka is, who Jacob Lawrence was. Read about Roland Hayes and Sam Gillian and Augusta Savage and Edmonia Lewis and Beulah Woodard and Harry Burley and James the Priest. Learn who all of these men and women are so that when you go somewhere, people will recognize you as a man or woman of culture. What do you think education is for? What culture? Cultivare, to till the soil, to make it so that it produces more. That's what we try to do here at Medgar Evans. We try to cultivate you, till your soil so that you produce more. I'll tell you something. I was invited to the consulate of another country. And you know how you get in these places and people are standing around talking. I want you to listen. And what happens is I ran across another ambassador, or an ambassador. I'm not an ambassador. I ran across an ambassador, and he and I were standing there talking. We were looking around at the artwork on the wall, and he said, "Oh, that's a Van Gogh." Now listen. When I went to school, I had 3 courses in humanities, and it was in those courses that I learned enough to be able to say, yes, that is a Van Gogh. It's from his later years. He looked at me and said, "Oh, you know Van Gogh." Now, if he had asked me another question about Van Gogh, I would have been lost. But I knew enough to get by. Then when I saw he might be going in that direction, I swung around. I said, "Isn't that a Paul Klee?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Do you know Klee?" I said, "Yes." And then we swung around, and I said, and that looks like Rembrandt. Notice the shadowing in his. This is all from Humanities 101 and 102, you understand? He was amazed. And then as we were talking and we got off into something else, another ambassador walked up to him. I think the man was a counselor or something from France. And he started speaking French. You know, that man cut off speaking to me in English and started speaking to that man in French. And then the 2 of them were standing there, and I was standing there. It was cool with me, you know. And then another one walked up speaking Italian. The same man cut off the French and started talking to Italian. The other one started talking Italian. And then they would just go back and forth between French and Italian and German, you know. And I'm standing there. And the man speaking French said something to me. I said, "Excuse me, I want to get some seltzer." But you know what I want for you? What I want for you? When I'm encouraging you to use your education to develop your cultural competence, I want from you the ability to be able to stand there and carry on those conversations, to talk about the art on the wall. And then the man started talking to me about my own culture. He said, "Are you aware of Jacob Lawrence?" Then he started talking to me about my own culture. He knew almost as much about me as I did. That's what culture will do for you. It'll make you significant. It'll make people notice you. It'll make people respect you. You know, they just can't look at you and turn away. They got to look again and say, "There's a man or a woman of some importance." Culture, a consciousness of interdependence. When I was in school, we had to learn a poem. Do you know it? "No man is an island. No man stands alone. Each man's joy is joy to me. Each man's grief is my own. We need one another, so I will depend. Each man as my brother, each man as my friend." You know who knows this now better than anybody else? George Bush. George Bush said, unilaterally, we're going to go in Iraq whether you go with us or not. We don't care if the rest of the world doesn't go. Didn't he say that? I understand this is going to be on television, so I want to be as correct as I can be. He went on in. Now we're over there, body bags coming home, a few at a time. Reminds you of Vietnam, huh? And it keeps increasing in number. But now he realizes that in order to finish what he started, he needs the world. You see that, beloved? You can't get by yourself. You're always going to need somebody. I think that's what Edna Machette was trying to tell us a little earlier. You're going to have to depend on the world. This is no longer the unconquerable globe of Columbus. This is now a tiny little sphere of intermixing cultures and civilizations. Interdependence. Look at your neighbor. You never know. Speak. It ought to be against the law for one black man or woman not to speak to another one. You need to speak to your neighbor. Get your nose out of the air. Relate to one another. Find out who they are. Well, we're coming home now. I can't spend the kind of time I want to on this because I know the hour's getting late. But you've got to value the individual human being. People are worth something. When you look at Senegal, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Rwanda, you begin to understand how people can be just disposed of if they get in the way. Hundreds of thousands of people slaughtered and killed. This is in African nations. You've got to value human life. As a clergyman, to wrap this up as quickly as I can, I'll go into it later if I can come back. If you want to know the value that God placed on human life, all you've got to look to is Calvary. There, God placed his price tag on humanity. He gave his only begotten Son. Finally, beloved, you've got to have a mighty faith. You've got to believe that there's a God somewhere. Now, for many people, especially in public universities, they don't like the presidents to talk about God. But I got to tell you something. I told you that education and faith were the Tigris and the Euphrates. I spent a little time on education. Let me end up on faith. You got to believe. When I was coming over here, we were listening to Sounds of Blackness. You know, it says, I believe in myself, and I never, ever doubt. Every day, no, I believe in the power, and I never, ever doubt. Every day, every hour, I believe. I believe in myself, and I know I get my help from that power in the sky. I believe. When I run into a roadblock, you know a lot if you learn, but you don't know everything. My education begins to fail, and I'm not sure which way to turn. I can always look to the hills from whence cometh my help, because I believe that my help comes from God. God is found in many houses and called by many names. One of the great, great powers, especially for the black man and woman in America, is our deep faith in God. I call again on J. Rosamond Johnson and James Weldon Johnson. They ended that great hymn for our people with these words. You know them well. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, and lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Time is not long enough for me to expand on all of these topics. But beloved, I hope that you have heard some of the things that I've tried to say. And remember that with a trained mind and an inspired heart, all things are possible. God bless you.
Let me thank Dr. Butts for his marvelous lecture today. You've heard a powerful lecture this afternoon. And I would hope that you are as encouraged as I am. Because as I listened to Dr. Butts, I thought about what are we doing here at Medgar to truly educate you, my brothers and sisters, and so that you will understand what's going on in the larger world, and so that you would understand your responsibility, both individually and collectively. And so I'm going to see if we can get Dr. Butts back to let me tell you, we have a marvelous faculty here. But I will tell you, some of what you've heard today will never get discussed in the classroom. That is why I have established the Presidential Lecture Series, so that you will come to hear great minds, people who have given so much, people who are learned, people who have toiled in the vineyard, and people who are making their impact on society. And you need to hear from people like Dr. Butts, and that is why we bring to this podium outstanding African Americans who represent the best of us. And you too can achieve greatness. You can achieve greatness because you are at Medgar Evers College, a great institution that's dedicated to your liberation. So go forward replay this lecture as you go forward. Let it be an inspiration to you. Let it be a challenge to you as you go forward. Keep moving. You're on a journey, and you need to enjoy this journey. God bless you.
There is a balm in Gilead to heal